Hello, this is Neil from mypaintgirls.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show how digital painting for beginners, or the basics of digital painting. If you want my brushes, which you can see here when I right click on the screen, let me get my brushes selected here. So if you want my brushes that I use all the time, then all you have to do is purchase any one of my tutorials and you'll get it. My tutorials range from $7 to $10, so they're really inexpensive. Right now I have a 9 hours of Photoshop training for only $10. That's 9 hours. It's super long. It covers everything about Photoshop you ever need to know, and a lot of techniques. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and if you've been wondering why I haven't been making the tutorials as much, it's because, well, I found the love of my life, and so a lot of my time is diverted elsewhere. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is start out with something. Well, this is one technique you can use, and it's really good starting ground, is pick up image that is from it's similar to the source you're going to be doing. So I'm going to be doing kind of like a jungle thing here. So to get the kind of colors I want, I've chosen this jungle image here. Then I'm going to stretch it out to be the size of my image. Then I'm going to go to filter. You can just do Gaussian blur, or you can go to noise and dust and scratches. And this is a cool technique. Just turn the radius up like so. And it will add, it'll take away a lot of the details. You can't totally see where all the detail is. Now I have some colors there to choose from, and a little bit of texture I can leave. What I'm going to do then is, let's see here. I'm going to grab a textured brush. I pick one of the, using Alt key. I'm going to pick one of these lighter colors in the background, and I'm just going to kind of paint in all the part that I know in the background there is going to be light, which is all right there. Also, you want to think about is negative space. It's really important when you're painting to think of negative space. To think of the overall image itself, like how is the image going to look. I'm going to pick kind of a grayish color for the gorilla for now. He's going to be much darker than that, and he's going to have a lot of backlighting on him. So I just want the gorilla to kind of stand out a little bit here. Let's put it back there. Notice I'm not worried about if my lines overlap and stuff at this point. It's not a big deal. And I can turn my brush size down if I wanted to fill in those parts there. Right, anyway, so there we go. I might even pick a darker, because I really want him to stand out a lot more than the background. The background is going to be light, like that kind of lightish, yellowish green color. And the foreground, everything in the foreground is going to be a lot darker. So what this does then is it adds contrast to the overall painting, and at a quick glance you can see the thumbnail. You can see this. You can see like zoomed way out. You can see the overall image there, the shape. You have some of this foreground here that kind of blends into him, and this is all dark. So basically, you want to think about it like opposites of contrast. So in the foreground, let's say it's all dark colors, and that makes some distinctive shape. And then you want negative space, and that's going to be all the light colors in the background, as you can see in there. And so it adds this contrast. It really makes the image pop, and it's cool that the image. Think about it in break up your image in fours, right? So kind of like a tic-tac-toe thing, like this. I just did that really quick, but you get the idea. I could probably do a little better than that, but you want to think about it kind of like I should probably use thicker lines so you can see that, huh? Okay, so think about it as it's like kind of like a tic-tac-toe thing. And you want the image, the focal point of the image to be either in this area, this area, this area, this area, or two of them or all four of them. And you want to kind of lead the eye around the image back to the focal point. So this is my main focal point, is the gorilla. So notice he kind of his language, his body language kind of goes like this and leads us down here. It leads the eye down there where his hand is. I'm going to have the foliage. Notice the foliage is shaped like this because that brings our eye back up into this area. And so there's this constant loop here. So there's like point, 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 and it's like a triangle, and it kind of just leads us around in the painting. That's something that you kind of want to do to keep the person look at the painting as long as possible. Alright, so that being said, I'm going to continue with the rendering process. So what I do is I continue to pull out these colors. I kind of want some of that background to stay back there because I kind of like it, of the image that was underneath. So I'm going to leave that there so some of that comes through. And then I'm going to kind of push this here. What I want to do also is I'm not worried too much about going over the gorilla right now. And the reason why is because I'm going to actually use some of that. It also gives some ideas for texture and stuff, like having an image underneath there. It'll kind of bring out some ideas you might have for how you might want to texture something. Anyway, so what I was saying is that after I start to kind of have some sort of life to this, I'm not worried about the gorilla so much right now. I'm going to kind of put a highlight on the very edge of the ground and kind of, it's going to kind of come in certain parts. And then since he's going to be a lot backlit, he's also going to be lit from like this direction a little bit. Let me draw that in red so you can kind of see what I was just talking about. Like that. So if I really had to like draw it more 3D, it's going to be like this or so. So it's going to be kind of like a forward lighting, coming down, highlighting all of this side of him. And that's just, if I can have a three-dimensional shape. And then the backlighting is really going to highlight the backlights. And I think it's going to be the more prominent lighting, and therefore it will determine the placement of his shadow. You would technically have kind of like two shadows, like a light one over there, but I'm not worried about the light one. His dark shadow is going to come out this way. I'm going to kind of pick a darker green. I'm going to add a little bit of bluish tint to that too, just because I like color variation. And I'm going to kind of have it like that because, that part of his hand shows through there, knuckles there, and all of that kind of will come out like that. And then shadow over there. Maybe have some shadow like that coming out. And it'll just kind of like blend into all this darker shadow over here. I want that whole color to fill that area in. Then I'm going to use Alt to pick up this color here, and I want to make it darker and more desaturated. I want to really bring out that detail of whatever that is, and I'm not quite sure exactly yet, but I want these trees to be really dark. I'm going to add a little bit more dark to them. Now at this point I can probably start, I can pull it on top of the line work just to see what it looks like. And I'm going to be turning the line work down. That way I just have an idea of what's there as I continue painting on it. Now I could do this all in one layer, but it's easier if I separate out the layers, like make a copy of this layer now and continue doing the background on it. And then I'll do the gorilla in front. Or actually I don't even have to do that. I can just continue working and like pretty much ignore the gorilla for now. And then I can come back, to do the gorilla because the line work is still there. I'm not working on top of the line work yet. So I'm going to kind of take this color in there. I'm going to add this kind of a blue color into some parts up in here. Like there's a different kind of light source there poking through. I even have it like poking through like that. So it's like, boom. And I'll probably end up, I just want to show you kind of what is in my head, but I'm going to end up doing that with an actual brush and stuff. But I kind of want the colors to be there for now. The loose part of the colors to be there. And I'm doing the very, very background now. That way I could come back in. I'm going to add some like yellow in there. And come back. I just lightly did that so it's not. Notice my opacity is at 100%, my flow is at 100%. Just adding a little bit of yellow. Don't want too much. Then I'm going to add some lighter colors to kind of dim part of that out and everything. So might want a little bit more of that color to come through. I don't want too much detail. I'm going to add a little bit of green to this color. I'm going to just come up like that. Make it a little bit darker, not much. And I'm going to zoom in now a little bit. Notice I'm still working with the texture brush. I'm probably going to work with that texture brush as long as possible. I kind of want to bring this piece here. And then this one here as well. So these are, obviously way in the background, so they don't, they're not going to have a whole lot of detail to them. But having that texture brush on and just adding a little bit of that will add a little bit of texture to it. And I might, let me see here, add a little bit of shade, not much, like that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of highlight. Part of it like that. And I'm going to take that darker color again, right next to the highlight. That's probably a little too dark of a color. Oops. That's where the darkest part of the vine would be. It's okay that if I add too much detail, because if I add too much colors and stuff, because what I like to do after that is take a big brush and just lightly go over it, so it kind of Oops, I should have grabbed the right color. So it kind of just blends in there. It's kind of in the background. And so turn off the line work so you can kind of see. Right, and then from there, I just need maybe some little shapes here and there in the background, like to just kind of distinguish that, hey, it's like 4. So you just grab one of the colors with the Alt key, like that, and then grab one of that color like this, and just make little shapes so it looks like maybe it's foliage or something. It just kind of hints that, hey, there's something there. Like this. I'm gonna take this color and just kind of add some shapes in there, maybe like a tree or something. And something like that. So I don't need much detail back there. That's another thing is the stuff that's way in the distant background, don't render as much. You don't need to add as much detail to far distant background stuff. You really only need the detail and more of the foreground stuff, and this adds like a depth, adds more of a realistic look to the piece. Okay, again, ignoring the gorilla, I'm going to add some textural in here. I'm not worried about going over the gorilla right now. I just want to get all this part in. I'm going to do the gorilla on a separate layer anyway. I'm not really sure what exactly that shape is yet. Maybe it's part of a tree we can't see out of the distance or something. I'm not really sure yet. I really kind of want to have some of that color just kind of blending in like this. Add some details in here. I'm just kind of tapping here and there with that brush to add those details with that blending part. And I'm, just going back and forth, left like this, smooth motion, just lightly hitting it to where, and picking up colors right next to there that are a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, a little bit greener. So I already had laid down all my colors, so now I'm just picking them as I see that I like them. I want a little bit of light show through his hand there, under there, and then this rest will be shadow. I want a little bit of light in here to kind of come through some pieces. So all this is kind of like, I think, foliage and stuff like that. Not exactly sure, but I need to add a little bit of detail like this, and then coming up in a little detail here and there. So I want to add some, I'm going to add depth to this part by, there's like shadow here, kind of shaped like that, and then you have the little bit of highlights, and then a little bit of highlight again, and then the shadow. And notice I just go right over the highlight and shadow to cut it, add different shapes, and it's going to get lighter as it comes, or not as bright as it comes out this way. So that kind of adds, like there's something there, like a, I don't know, part of a tree or something, and it kind of just turns in maybe sticks and stuff like this down here. And that's where you get really into adding more detail and stuff. Probably not something I'm going to have time to get into anyway. But I can show the basics of painting by doing a quick painting anyway, so it's all good. Because I don't want it to be too long. If you want really long and depth tutorials, you can just buy one of the tutorials. That's just easier that way for me. Add a little bit more shadow down here. I'm just kind of thinking of shapes and stuff that kind of fit into him. Right, so now I'm going to work on top of this for gorilla. And I'm going to add a little bit of this dark color in here. And now I'm starting to imagine, the overall kind of like shape he's going to have and everything. Notice I'm using my painting technique. I'm not using any of my comic techniques at all. I'm just staying with this rough brush here, and I'm just pulling in all these different grays. So, some of his head, I kind of like that color right there. I know that that's going to be like the rim lighting in the background. And I know that's going to highlight a lot of his body and stuff. So, and I'm just trying to take these different colors and add them in there. A little bit of green and stuff, because I want there to be a variety of colors to the gorilla. I don't want them to be all like just one ugly color. Naturally, the body of the gorilla is going to pick up a lot of the background colors, and that's true for pretty much any object. And it just really works good for stylized painting to since his forearm's way in the foreground here, it's going to be the darkest, and it's going to have the most detail and the most contrast than anything else. So I'm going to be adding like a really dark shadows to him. Let that fur to really come out. I'll show it all right in there. Right, so it's starting to come together. You know, there's showing like his darkest darks over there. Just kind of defining some of the muscles by putting the dark parts. And I'm going to kind of zoom in. So what I do is I just lightly lay down a color like this. And I can pick using the Alt key, pick a color right next to it and just kind of blend those together lightly just by pushing in like one direction like that, just doing a brush stroke. You're really just trying to capture the shape with a couple brush strokes. I'm not worried about the edge work yet. I can come back and erase that. So notice he has all these colors in him too. I know under his breast here, we're going to have a lot of shadow in here and stuff. Some of the hardest parts to think about is, you know, where do shadows and stuff fall. But if you really just think about each part as its separate shape, you know, like you have this as one separate shape. It's like a triangle type shape, and then you just shade it as though it were its own shape. So you just kind of, it's, you know, darken the side, light on the side from the general lighting. Then we'll have backlighting, but I'm not worried about backlighting yet. I'll add that in a second. After I get all this, I can even add that completely last. So then I have this whole big belly shape, and I'm going to add some really highlights, green highlights to it, and yellow. I want to add a lot of color in him. I don't want it to just be gray. I mean, it's all muted, you know, it's all grayish, but, and notice I'm picking background colors for the shadows and stuff. His legs are all going to be pretty much, at least this under part of his legs, are all going to be pretty much in shadow. And then this under part here is going to be lit from the backlighting, so it's going to have it kind of like yellow. That color will kind of come up a little bit. Notice at this stage in the painting, I'm not worried. Oops, I'm going to be erasing that, so I'm not painting on one layer. So, but notice at this stage, I'm not worried about details at all as far as hair or anything like that. I'm just focusing on big shapes. That's it. Nothing else but how do the big shapes work. And so I'm just modeling at this point. I'm like, see how I treat that as its own separate shape. Treat the legs as its own separate shape. Treat this as its own separate shape. Treat this muscle and this muscle as their own shape. I can have that middle muscle that, you know, humans have. I don't know if gorillas have it or not. I imagine they have something very similar. Their anatomy is very similar. So I'm really kind of just cheating and going off mostly human anatomy here. I haven't really studied much about gorilla anatomy. I mean, every time before I do something, I look at pictures and stuff. But I'm just one little stroke highlights, you know, and I'll probably reduce my brush size too. Start with your brushes big. And then don't worry about reducing the brush size until after you have all the details down. Once you have worked out all the details of the image, you know, that is, you have, by details at this point, I only mean, let me go in here. Anyway, by details at this point, I only mean that the overall structure is there, the shape of the image is there. That's going to be a little darker than his teeth. That's all darker. Part of his face. I probably still didn't word that right. What I mean is that just the modeling part right now is all I'm worried about. That all the shapes register. That's what's important at this stage. If you can get down your shapes right, everything else will follow. So what I recommend doing is, when you start working on paintings, whether it's digital or whether it's, you know, regular, like just standard painting, brushes and stuff, I really recommend that you focus on this aspect of your painting. I'm going to add like a shadow for his head there. You don't even have to focus on color. If you really want to, as a beginner, just use black and white. Start with black and white. And that will make it to where all you're focusing on is the shapes. So you're not focused on anything else. Your entire focus is on how do the shapes relate to each other. And that's a good place to start. So I'm just, you know, slowly rendering the shapes here. And again, I'm really just focusing on the shapes. I'm keeping it very simple. This is, how I work. So I'm always doing this. Now I'm doing two things at once, of course, so it's a little bit harder than, if it were in black and white. And the two things I'm doing at once is not only am I modeling the character, like, making sure all of the shapes register, but I'm also, adding the color variation into his body and stuff that I'm going to need. Notice it gets very cool, warm and then cool, like opposite. So the shadows are more cool and highlights are more warm. You usually do opposites. So if you have warm highlights, you do cool shadows, and if you have cool highlights or lighting in general, then you do just kind of like this. You do warm shadows, which would be more like red shadows. You just add red into your shadows. So at this stage here, I'm not really worried. I just want to register, like I said, the shape here. That's all I'm worried about there, is that overall shape. Does the shape register? Not worried about the detail of the hair and stuff like that. I'll come back with that. But see, the shape is what's registering there. This is backlighting. That's going to be on all these shapes, like that. And it's going to be on the outside, though. Looking over it, make sure everything looks like how I want it to. I like, zooming way out even to make sure it still registers as a thumbnail. Because if it registers as a thumbnail and you can see everything, that means that you did a good job with lighting and everything. Notice I broke up a shadow here with little highlights, because sometimes that happens. So it adds kind of a cool depth to the picture. Alright, so now I'm going to just kind of, the darkest part of his fingers are going to be in the center. I need a smaller brush now. I'm starting to get a little more detail part of the gorilla. So it's basically the highlighting is going to be on the outsides there of the fingers. So I'm just going to put all that in there. This will all be dark, I think. Right, so it's all starting to come together. Take this lighter color here, and I'm going to kind of push on the edges of the fingers here. I can't see it all too much because, I have the line work there as well, which I'm going to start going over in a second. Right, so it's all starting to look good. Finally, then what I do is I will turn my line work down probably a little bit more. And now I'm going to start working on top of the line work.